Kim Kardashian, narcissistic, fame hungry, willing to do whatever it takes. Or at least for years, this has been our interpretation of what we have seen from her rise of fame. But what if this isn't a story about her rise to fame, but instead how she was groomed and exploited for fame? In this deep dive, we're going to explore Kim's dark psychology. We're going to answer the question, is Kim a narcissist? How did she end up here? And I'm going to propose to you, what if the most famous woman in the world was never free? What if the body she sold, the image that she built, the empire that she ran was never really hers? This really isn't a success story. It's actually quite heartbreaking. Kim is the golden child of the narcissistic matriarch. She learned very early on that love was transactional and her worth was a performance. The world watched her rise, and some of the most memeable moments, nobody stopped to ask, is this right? Instead, we all quoted along, "You're doing amazing, sweetie." We never stopped to think this girl who just said a few minutes ago that she didn't want to take off her clothes is now being coached and exploited not by a stranger, but by her mother. Welcome back to my channel. This is part 2 of the series that we are exploring on the Kardashians. In my last series, I broke down the dark psychology of Kris Jenner. We learned about Kris's dark past, how she physically abused her children and abandoned them for days. And we saw the groundwork that Kris was laying, yes, for the Kardashian empire, but also for a very dysfunctional family. And in this dysfunctional family system, we learned how love is transactional, how it's based on your beauty, your performance, your looks. And at the heart of this is the golden child, who is Kim Kardashian. So in a narcissistic family dynamic, this is the child who can do no wrong. But what I want to make so clear is there is nothing great about being a golden child. This is a gilded cage that you are trapped in. I know when someone has this mass amount of privilege, it can be hard for us to have empathy. Kim Kardashian is a billionaire. She really has the whole world at her feet. I've deep dived the Kardashians for years. This was my most viral series that I had on TikTok. And after doing this deep dive, I was even surprised by the insights that I came away with. And a lot of them were quite heartbreaking. We're going to dive into this disturbing paradox of Kim being the golden child, where she was completely idolized by her mother one minute, but in the next minute was completely brutalized if she did not perform. So how did Kim Kardashian, who was born into an insane amount of wealth and opportunity, become both the golden child and the victim of severe emotional and physical abuse, allegedly? And what has that dysfunction and upbringing done to her psyche? You're going to see how Kim's relationship with her mother has been at the inception point for every major event that has happened in her life. We're going to dive into the sex tape with Ray J, explore some of Kim's own most abusive moments towards her sisters, discuss what this means for how Kim will end up parenting her kids, and also dive into what will happen when Kris passes. Will Kim continue to carry on the narcissistic crown? And is she already continuing the very cycle that shaped her? This journey is going to be emotionally intense, psychologically insightful. There's a reason why so many of you guys, and I love and appreciate your comments so much, but I've written in examples of your own family dysfunction and say, I see myself in this. It can appear at one moment that we have absolutely nothing in common with the Kardashians, but like I said, at the heart of this story, it's about psychological dysfunction. If you have ever been the golden child in a toxic family or felt like you had to perform for love, this story is going to hit uncomfortably close. So to start out with, it's important to remember what we learned from Kris's deep dive, and that is that a narcissistic family dynamic follows rules. They have this script that we always see it over and over and over again. This is what is so cool about psychology, is people follow patterns. The science of psychology has been built on patterns. You might see this video and say there's no possible way you can know anything about these people if you haven't sat down with them. Well, guess what? Narcissists play out the same script again and again. That's why you can hear someone's abuse story with their narcissist and be like, mine was the exact same. They said the same exact things to me. And in a narcissistic family system where your parent is the narcissist, there's almost always one dominant narcissistic parent. And in this case, all signs point to Kris Jenner. This is the parent who demands adoration and control. And in such families, children aren't unconditionally loved. They're assigned roles. So typically there is a golden child. People have asked, how do they end up choosing a golden child? And it can be for a couple of different things. Number one, physical attractiveness usually does play some sort of role role in this. So this can either be the child that is the most physically beautiful, or the parent can see themselves in this child. So either they think they look most like this child, that's kind of their idealized projection of themselves on this child, or they might actually look the most like this child. Another example besides Kim and Kris of the narcissistic parent and the golden child is also Elon Musk and his child X. That man is absolutely obsessed with the letter X. This is the child that he named X. He has 13 children. He has just as many children. It actually might be more now. Yes, I forgot about the latest one. He has 14 children. Do you ever see the other 14 children or hear about them? No, but we very often see his human shield X protecting him while he's having meetings with the president. This is his golden child. This is who he is going to have take over his throne. He sees himself in this child. And Kim is Kris's golden child. From very early on, Kim was singled out as being the rising star in this family. If you even look at Kris's memoirs, the other children when described, their description very short. Kim's is this detailed adoration and especially focusing on her beauty. Paris Hilton is another one where the accounts pretty much say her family had an unhealthy obsession with her beauty. This is the same way with Kim. She's literally described as a princess, and just that she was so beautiful, had such a good personality. You can tell there's a part of Kris that is just absolutely fawning over her. And the very sad thing too is with these dynamics, this is also how the siblings end up being triangulated against each other, because resentment will naturally build in other siblings. On the outside looking in, it might seem like I want to be mother's favorite, but this love comes with strings attached, and those strings are chains. And that is because the love and support that Kim would receive from her mother was 100% conditional. Kris would shower Kim with praises and privilege when Kim performed. But when Kim didn't, this came with anger and punishment. We explored in Kris's series how this approval could so quickly turn into anger and punishment. From Robert Kardashian's diaries, he has accounts detailing of Kris physically abusing Kim, saying that she was kicking her when Kim was 9 and saying that she was going to kill her. So imagine this for a second from a child's perspective. You are both the most loved, and that person who is giving you the most loved is also attacking you. Psychologically, this sends such deep mixed messaging, but the core message is I am only loved when I'm perfect. And if I slip up, I am worthless and I am in danger. Just to share an aside story, I was the golden child in growing up in a very dysfunctional family. I know there are many of you watching that were in the same predicament, and I'm sure you know and then can relate of how much this instills a fear of failing, always feeling like you have to perform, always feeling like you have to get the next accolade, questioning who are you without the performance, questioning who are you if you don't achieve, because you've learned so early on that you really are nothing without achieving. And now we see Kim, even publicly as an adult, admitting in interviews that so many of her decisions, she thinks about what her mother would think. That is the psychological leash that Kris Jenner has on Kim. And it's made up of equal parts love bombing, which is made up of her lavish praise, and the other part is fear. The fear that she will lose her mother's love. Being the golden child meant that Kim associated her worth with how well she performed. And you're going to see that pop up in all of her decisions, in all of her businesses, and inside of all of her relationships. Kim pretty much grew up in a pressure cooker of conditional affection. And it's no wonder that Kim has absolutely become a workaholic. Being a workaholic is interesting because it's obviously, we know if someone is an addict, we're very concerned with that. We know it comes from a deep wounded spot. But being a workaholic, because we see success in such a positive light, and on top of that, we are a capitalistic society. A lot of us have that download and blueprint that your worth is based off your performance. But being a workaholic has those same themes as any other addiction. And Kris Jenner famously drilled in the mantra to her kids, never take your foot off the gas. So no wonder Kim became the daughter that could never say no, that took on every single photo shoot, that flew across the country. And it's no wonder then when you look at her fights that she has with Kourtney, how mean she is, how evil and nasty she is to Kourtney. And that's not Kim's voice, that is Kris's voice. Kim has very openly bragged about her intense work ethic. It's almost as if she's proving to the world and Kris that she is worthy. And so look at it from that lens and take the interview where she says, get your fucking ass up and work. It seems like no one wants to work these days. This obviously came with a ton of backlash. People were saying, you're so privileged. What do you know about work? But this interview actually revealed something very critical about Kim's psyche. And that is that she genuinely equates hard work with worthiness. Why? Because in her family environment, she learned that not working hard meant not being valued. In the Kardashian family, work isn't just encouraged, encouraged, it's demanded. And look at what has happened to Kourtney when you go against that. Kourtney is not valued because of that. Kris has openly said that Kim is her favorite because she works the hardest, and that is not praise, that is pressure. What Kris is essentially saying is earn your spot or you will lose it. And Kim took that seriously. We see her obsessed with image, with aesthetics. She built an empire, but it is built in fear. Fear of falling out of favor and fear of being replaced. And then you look at the mean shit that she has said to Kourtney. And what theme do we see behind that? She once said, I'm not buying her a fucking pair of shoes. I bought her whole fucking career. And then when she talked to Kourtney about if you only knew what it took to run a business, if you had a business you were passionate about, but you don't, and then goes on to say that Kourtney is the least interesting to look at. You will learn what was weaponized in a narcissistic family by learning about what do the siblings now weaponize in a fight. What does she always go back to weaponize? It's looks and it's work ethic. And another reason why I think she is actually and genuinely resentful of Kourtney, it goes beyond the fact that Kim has a connection with worthiness and work value in her head. This is also because Kim was exploited sexually by her mother, and that is how they have a career. Kim has deeply internalized this ethos. She's almost a surrogate of Kris, enforcing Kris's voice, chastising her sisters for laziness, reminding them who the breadwinner is, but also angry and resentful that her sisters did not have to do the same things that Kim did to be at the top. My guess that Kourtney not pulling her weight, wanting to break out of this family system, stating that she doesn't care about things like glam or filming, this directly goes against their core narcissistic family mission. And you hear when Kim goes at Kourtney, spite and hate. She is genuinely angry.
Maybe if you had a business that you were passionate about, then you would know what it takes to run a business, but you don't. So don't even act like you know what I'm talking about.
And yeah, maybe Kim does have a right to be angry. Her body was essentially sold. Who she should be angry at is her mother, but that's not how projection works now, is it? So by Kim's late teens and early 20s, she's hungry to carve out an identity, but always with her mother in her ear, guiding her choices. So this is where Kim starts working for Paris Hilton as her closet organizer. So Kim working for Paris and being exposed to this, she's pretty much having a front row seat to fame. And this is something her mom encouraged. Her mom was already in these upper class circles. What we learned from Kris's deep dive is Kris was going to make sure she had a seat in the highest circles. On the flip side of Kim working for Paris, we also see this humiliation, which is a theme in Kim's life. Paris's image has changed a lot, but at the time she was known for her cattiness, and she did not at all treat Kim with respect. There's an interview of Paris saying that Kim's butt looks like cottage cheese in a trash bag. And think about from Kim's perspective, this theme showing up again, this someone that you just want to be liked by, and they're degrading your body on the radio. And I'm sure, as you can imagine, being raised by Kris, you are extremely body conscious. Remember, this is the other theme beyond work that she drilled into her kids' minds, that their worth comes from how they look. And Kim continued to end up in relationships that mirrored her mother. We forget all about Kim's marriages, but at 19, she was married. Her first marriage was to Damon Thompson. He was a music producer. The marriage was short and turbulent, and court documents say that Damon was controlling and abusive, controlling Kim's every move. Apparently, he didn't let her see friends and was physically violent. And if true, it is heartbreaking, but it is not surprising. Kids from abusive narcissistic homes very often fall into similar patterns with relationships. I was asked once before on my TikTok, why do the Kardashians always end up in unhealthy relationships? And I said, it is because they themselves are unhealthy. But Kim left that marriage, and her mother was probably happy for it because she could go back into her control, and that man wasn't high profile enough. So she went straight into the Hollywood dating scene. Some people that she dated includes Nick Cannon, Reggie Bush, and Ray J, which this is where we get the tape that famously launched the Kardashians' empire. By now, everyone with an internet connection has heard of Kim's infamous sex tape, and that this is what really launched her career, put her on the map. The very first episode of Keeping Up with the Kardashians ever is her talking about the tape. So the sex tape came out in 2007. And what Kim and the family pretty much reported is that Kim was devastated. She was filled with shame. You know, this was a private moment that she filmed with her boyfriend. But there was always a raised eyebrow because Kris capitalized on this, and oh, did she capitalize on this into a $1 billion empire. But how they frame this is, yeah, the sex tape came out and it's horrible and we are mortified, but we are going to turn lemons into lemonade. But then Ray J has come out and he said that is not the the case. People have suspected, there have been conspiracy theories out there. Did Kris Jenner leak it? And from Ray J's account, yes, they were all in on this, to the point where Ray J said they not only filmed one tape, they not only filmed two tape, but they filmed 3 tapes that Kris Jenner herself looked at, reviewed, and said, this is actually the best one. Now imagine that for a second, because honestly, even without that at its bare bones, we could raise the theory, is Kim pimping out her daughter by exploiting on this supposedly traumatic event? But then we might have on our hands an actual case of Kris Pimp Jenner sitting there reviewing videotapes of her daughter being railed and saying, which one can I exploit the best? Not only is it horrible in the moment, but you think about all of the slut shaming that Kim has always endured. That is something that still follows her, is that she is just this whore, and that is how she made her empire. But what if Kim was never that? What if her mother the whole time was pushing her to be that person? And eventually, if you're abused so long and you are stuck in this, you have to start drinking the Kool-Aid. That is where cognitive dissonance comes up, and your brain will start doing gymnastics. And at some point, it is better to say, oh yeah, this was my idea too. So from Ray J's claims, he says they each had a $400,000 payout. More disturbingly, he claims that Kris Jenner personally oversaw the deal, and she watched multiple recordings and handpick the one that would be best for public release. In his own words, we filmed 3 separate tapes, watched the footage, and made a decision about which tape to release. So for Kim, this sex tape chapter was probably traumatic, but it is the foundational myth of her celebrity. It is the original sin turned into holy scripture of the Kardashian brand. And within it, that is what solidified Kim as the indisputable center of the empire. Kim brought them infamy, and with that, Kris alchemized that into fame and fortune. So I know it can be said, well, you know, Kim was an adult at this point and she is making her own decisions. But when you have been raised and conditioned that all you want is your parents' love and support, when they are sitting there whispering, the mother who should be protecting you and is saying, this is going to be good for you, just listen to me, just trust me. And this isn't the only time we see Kim conflicted on, do I listen to myself or do I listen to the mother who is sitting there saying, I know what's best for you, honey, trust me, you're doing amazing, sweetie. So let's look at that moment, because I find it very disturbing how memeable this moment was. So in Keeping Up with the Kardashians, Kim is asked to do this Playboy shoot, and in it she pretty much says, I don't want to do this because everyone is already thinking of me like a whore. She had the sex tape scandal. She wants to rebrand her image, and her mom is there encouraging her, just do it. I think it'll be good for the brand. That is like the brainwashing you see over and over again. It's good for the brand. Like level 10 cult shit, do it for the brand. So Kim ends up saying, okay, I will do it if I'm not nude. And everyone is telling her, okay, yeah, that's fine. That's fine. No, you don't have to take off any clothes. It's going to be very tasteful. It's going to be Playboy. You're just going to be in some lingerie and it'll be fine. And she agrees to it. Then when she gets on set, she asks, oh, I don't have to be nude yet. And Hugh Hefner is there saying, oh yeah, you do. So Kim is anxious. She's nervous, but don't worry. Her loving, caring mother is there saying, go ahead, go on, come on, it's gonna be good for the brand, that pressure. And remember what Kim's deep belief is, I have to perform to be loved. That's why I say it comes down to that feeling that this is survival. It's so easy to judge Kim. She is the sex symbol, she's successful, she's beautiful. We've seen her do some evil ass shit. We've seen moments of her own narcissism, of her own coldness, but at the center of that is that little girl who wants to perform for love, that is so worried about, what if I don't have that? Because remember that time where I went against my mom and I was kicked and beat and being told that I'm going to kill you? That is the survival part that takes over in Kim. So then she goes through and does the Playboy shoot, even though that she is filled with anxiety. And you see her mother there with a digital camera, capturing her trauma essentially, but smiling and saying, you're doing amazing, sweetie. And isn't that so telling of Kris Jenner's psyche? Because Kim was doing amazing at following her control. Kris's tone when she says, you're doing amazing, sweetie, is sugary, it's supportive, but the subtext is, keep going, ignore your feelings, this is for the greater good. Kris offering words of encouragement while Kim is there awkwardly posing nude is the ultimate example of parental boundaries obliterated by ambition. Kim's body, literally her naked body, has become a commodity for which Kris had zero shame staking claim in. She hovered over the shoot not as a protective mother, but as a manager, ensuring the product, Kim's sex appeal, Kim's body, was maximized. The Playboy shoot wasn't just a one-off thing either. Let me know in the comments what other times you have spotted this, but another time came when Kim was doing a photo shoot for W magazine, and when the images came out, she was crying because they exposed more than what she wanted. She was sobbing on the phone. She was saying, "I'm so mad right now." Obviously feeling betrayed by how exposed she was, and Kris's response was basically, "This is high art. It's fabulous. Don't worry about it." Zero acknowledgement of her daughter's feelings of feeling violated. To me, the Playboy shoot and others like it show us something into Kimberly's psychology, which is how she learned to toggle on and off her emotions. She has said in an interview before that calmness is her superpower. And in this, she said she was reflecting on when did calmness help her out? And she was like, oh my gosh, it was the Paris robberies, that time I was so calm. So I must have learned calmness after. And I think, by the way, that calmness really probably came in handy with Kanye, but I also think that she learned that superpower of calmness well before Kanye or the Paris robberies. She learned from Kris, if you are uncomfortable, bury it. And I want to point out too what was happening with the siblings as these photo shoots were going on. In the Playboy episode, while Kris is cheering on Kim, her siblings, Chloe and Courtney, are back home making fun of her. This is literally how triangulation happens between siblings. You see Kim being a slave to her mother's power, up on her favoritism pedestal, and the siblings below her are developing resentment. Kim has resentment towards her siblings that they don't have to do the same, that they don't have to work as hard. She starts to take on her mother's voice and chastising them for not working as hard. And then you have the siblings who feel less than. And all they can really do is fall in line to this narcissistic pattern, or they can cope for brief moments by tearing the person who is up on the pedestal. So all this triangulation does is create conflicts with the siblings. Now they don't have the support of each other, which narcissists love for this to happen inside of family dynamics, because this keeps them in power, this keeps them in control. And we see actually an extreme complex when it comes to the siblings. Look at how they are all trying to morph into Kim. And when you take into account Kris's psychology, her being the narcissistic matriarch, the leader of this family, her placing Kim on this pedestal, what we are seeing are all of these siblings trying to become Kimberly, but also hating Kim for that. Again, like I said, this is how projection works. Who we should be hating most of the time is our parents, but we don't do that. We are so biologically wired often not to hate our parents, not to break free, that those attacks come at each other. And we have Kim so desperately trying to hold on to her spot at the top, and she is walking this emotional tightrope, and that tightrope goes into so many parts of her life, including her romantic relationships. It is unfortunately true, especially in toxic family systems, that we very often marry and end up dating people that remind us of this toxic pattern. There are a lot of different reasons for this. This is actually one of the main things I work with my clients on. And if you are listening to this and you want a one-on-one coaching session with me, you can book that down below. But I see this all the time. And a lot of times what we're doing is we are replaying these emotional issues that we had in childhood, unconsciously trying to solve them. But we don't. And you can't when you are picking the identical version of your parent, which is also what the subconscious wants, because it takes your mind back to those core beliefs that you developed as a child, which is, I knew it. I knew I wasn't worthy. I knew I wasn't good enough. All of those fears that I had for maybe hating myself, see, they are now confirmed. And that is intentional. And all of that happens at the inception of the partner that we choose. And in Kim's case, her most significant romantic relationship was with Kanye West. This is the man that she was married to 7 years. She has 4 kids with him. And Kanye, just like Kris, treated Kim as an extension of himself. Both Kanye and Kris molded Kim and put her on display. They had extreme adoration for her. This was another example where she was propped up on that pedestal, but it was also a familiar, dominating love, filled with control, filled with perform how I want you to, or there will be consequences. If you perform how I want you to, you will be praised, you will be love bombed, you will be lavished with all of these gifts. And if you don't, things aren't going to be good, and I will take my love away. If you remember, just like Kris, Kanye took a very front seat role in engineering Kim's image. One of the first things he famously did on Keeping Up with the Kardashians was doing a literal overhaul of her closet. And this scene reminds me so much of the Playboy scene, because what you you see is Kanye coming in saying, I know what's best for you. So he comes in, he calls all of her clothes outdated, ghetto, and starts saying we need to get rid of all of them. Kim is crying, saying she doesn't want to get rid of her sparkly dresses. But yet Kim still stands there watching all of her favorite items be tossed into trash bags. She's in some ways protesting that she doesn't want to do this, and Kanye is sitting there, don't worry, trust me. It's the same thing Kris did during the Playboy shoot. Kim is sitting there with anxiety, about to cry, and Kris is saying, don't worry, sweetie, you're doing amazing. And Kanye was there too, pretty much saying, don't worry, this is good for the brand. But this is control, plain and simple, disguised as help. And this brings us back to her saying, calmness is my superpower. Of course it is. Her compliance means survival. And Kanye, like Kris, could be incredibly charming. He showered her with praise. He always called her the most beautiful woman on earth, and in some ways did adore her. But with that adoration came ownership. Kim was his girl, just like Kim at one time was Kris's girl. So let's briefly consider Kim's other relationship patterns. So she first has her marriage at 19 years old with Damon Thompson, who was allegedly abusive. Then we have her Ray J sex scandal era. After that, she was married to Kris Humphries. This was her 72-day long marriage. And interestingly enough, this was the time that she had married someone finally who was younger than her and who she was more successful than. So the one relationship where she held more power and fame than the man, and that relationship imploded very quickly. Perhaps maybe she wasn't used to being the one who is in control. And then she ends up with Kanye. This is her longest relationship, lasting much longer than 72 days. And I don't know much about Kris Humphries, but I would put money on it without even looking anything about him that Kanye is much crazier than Kris Humphries. And at the time where they started dating, Kanye was much more successful, much more influential. He was also volatile, unpredictable, love bombing, and very controlling of Kim. And maybe this is where she feels more comfortable. And I see clients, adults do it all the time where they mistake that familiarity with chemistry and with love. What she has with Kanye is someone who instills fear and still keeps her on her toes, just like what happened with her mother. But Kim did manage to break out of Kanye's clutches. So maybe we are seeing parts of her that are starting to change. But after Kanye, she ended up with Pete Davidson. And Pete does have his own set of like BPD intensity, but he is much more easygoing than Kanye. And again, this is a situation where Kim now is much more successful, much more influential. She would be in control. And that relationship didn't last very long. It ended after less than a year. So it will be very interesting to see where Kim's pendulum swings when she ends up in a relationship again. So the next question we need to dive into about Kim after living a life with two very controlling figures, Kris and Kanye. And that is, will she go on to perpetuate the cycle or will she end up breaking it? And what we can look at now to determine that is, how does she interact with her own children and what is the dynamic between her and her sisters today? So Kim has definitely been criticized because North is already in the spotlight. Kim has already talked about becoming North's manager, although she has said that she is not taking a 10%, but it should have us questioning, is she just playing out the same role of Kris? One thing I will say, just from using predictive psychology, I don't believe that North will be Kim's golden child. It's narcissistic parents often pick the golden child who looks like them or who is the most beautiful. And Chicago has that type of beauty that people are already gushing about. I don't want to give it too much attention because it's a little creepy and sick for us to talk about a child's beauty. But why I bring it up is the way people talk about Chicago's beauty is the same way that Kim's beauty was being talked about all the way back in Kris's memoir. It's the same way that Paris Hilton's beauty was talked about with her parents. It does seem in some ways that Kim wants a bit different of a cycle for North. I've heard her say things like she wants to protect North in a different way. Also, we have Kanye to look at and his psychology and who his golden child will end up being. North's personality does seem to mimic Kanye a bit more, and she challenges Kim way too much, I believe, for her to be the golden child. But Kim also has come back. Like, there are tones of what Kim says to North that you are not supposed to exploit exploit the family, that you have loyalty to the family. And this is what happens in narcissistic family systems, is that loyalty to the narcissist script. It is just an unspoken rule. You don't go against it. You don't complain about it. You don't talk about the abuse. And if you do, you are punished. So what about Kim's relationship with her sisters? I honestly look at it and I'm like, this shit is sad. Do you guys see as we're like breaking this down, and these sisters are literally getting plastic surgery to look like Kim. There's competition with each other. They're upholding that narcissistic script. But Kourtney is someone who is breaking out. She has gotten therapy, and I think this is why she even more so sees a lot of the dysfunctional patterns inside of her family. And we have a direct account of Kourtney saying to Kim, "You're such a narcissist." She literally says in one episode, "You are a narcissist. Everything you do is about you and how it looks to the world." That last part is exactly how it is with a narcissist. And that is also a sister who has known Kim her entire life saying this. She obviously has probably seen Kim's narcissistic patterns, and Kim does have some. I think what Kourtney was doing in this moment is essentially calling out years of frustration, with Kim caring more about optics than feelings. Very similar to how Kris Jenner is. And many viewers found themselves nodding along with Kourtney because we too have seen it. And what this comment says is that at least one person inside of the family perceives Kim as fitting the description of a narcissist. And Kim didn't deny it either. Instead, she just deflects by questioning Kourtney's happiness, turning it back on the accuser, which is a narcissistic tactic. If I had to give an exact answer of is Kim a narcissist, I would probably say that what she has more so of is a narcissistic injury. She was trained to think of herself as special and to maintain this perfect facade and to tie her value to external success. Those are common narcissistic tendencies, but they are coming off as her survival strategy. In some ways, Kim honestly might be more of a people pleaser. She wants everyone to love her, but she also plays by the rules to get that love. Meaning she works hard, she adapts her image, she does what's expected. A true grandiose narcissist, more so like Kris and Kanye, will break the rules and do whatever it takes for that admiration. They operate by their own rules and then they expect others to comply. Kim is different, where she is just a bit more conciliatory, and this could be genuine or it could be by design. Nonetheless, the fact that she's even being compared to Kris shows that that cycle is at least partially intact. In some ways, she is exactly using Kris's playbook, just with a lighter touch, but she is using those same strategies to keep the family empire alive. Let's take a step back and reflect, what does Kim's story mean beyond the tabloids and TV ratings? Kim Kardashian's life has been extreme. Sex tapes, $1 billion empire, millions of followers, marriages to mega celebrities. It's not always a life that many of us can relate to, but peel back those layers, and at the center of it is a deeply human story about family dysfunction and longing for love. We can rightfully bring up, maybe Kim is just complicit to all of this. She is the one who is keeping this narcissistic machine train rolling. But she was also a little girl who learned that love had to be earned. She knew she had to shine or else she would be cast into shadows, and she did this at whatever cost it took. She grew into a woman that achieved everything possible, yet she is still the one who moves her own goalpost. For anyone who has come from their own dysfunctional family, Kim's predicament is recognizable. Maybe you were the golden child who always had to be perfect for your family's approval. Maybe you felt you existed to make your family look good and your needs always came second. Kim's experiences echo that. Performing for love, to play a role for her mother, her partners, and the public. There's a poignant parallel between Kim and any golden child, and that is the qualities that make you special within that family are what become your biggest burden. And this raises an intriguing question, and one of you asked this in my last video, and that is, well, what will happen when Kris Jenner passes away? If Kris is the center, the nucleus of how this narcissistic family continues to thrive, what happens when that leaves? Well, narcissistic family theory says a couple of different things. One is that the family could completely fall apart. And when this happens, it's not like people wake up and they see the day and then the family rejoices and comes back together. A lot of the times you see a lot of estrangement that happens between siblings. So they will literally just drift apart, do their own thing. And that is because the central manipulative force is no longer there to hold the family together. But other times, a narcissistic heir will ascend, which is typically the golden child. and then the cycle will continue again, keeping the family orbiting around a new son. Kim appears poised for the latter. She has, whether consciously or not, been learning from Kris all of these years, and Kris has even alluded in different interviews that Kim is going to be the leader, and that is for Kim to decide what path she will take. And her story for us can be a warning and a lesson, and that warning is, if you don't address your childhood wounds, you may unconsciously end up becoming exactly like those who hurt you. But the lesson is, it is never too late to break that cycle, and we have also seen that in shades of Kim, of her at least trying to be different. It seems she does want to be a gentler parent to her children. She at least speaks a balance and trying to protect them more. So only time will tell which path Kim does end up taking. So as we wrap up, what did we learn? That the story of Kim Kardashian, the golden child to a narcissistic matriarch, is ultimately a story about the search for unconditional love. Kim technically did everything right to earn love. She became beautiful, successful, compliant, and a superstar. And yet, like many children who walk a similar path, there is that inner child in her probably still asking, but will you still love me for me? Will you love me if I don't sparkle? Thank you for spending time with me diving into the dark psychology of Kim Kardashian. Next up, I will be deep diving Khloe, which is also a heartbreaking story. So please make sure you're subscribed if you haven't already. And until next time, please take care of yourselves. You're doing amazing, sweetie.